Trading Time with your host, John Rousseau.
Well, what can I say about John Park? He is the Einstein of Summerland. That's how I would describe John. There isn't a subject that I've questioned him on that he doesn't have immediate answers for. He's 24/7 engineering something in his head, taking something apart, putting it back together, making it better. He has been an influential force in my career as an industrial designer. Anytime I have a question, I'm always putting it to him first to get his feedback. And I really hope that you enjoy the interview with him today. There's a lot of information in it, and it's not going to be the last time that I'll interview him. Enjoy.
And what an old guy, my old mentor, said, that it has to be able to come out of silence. Silence is the background noise to everything. That's a note comes out of silence. You get guitars that have all this rattly, jingly, dingle-dangle going on all the time. And all the notes are superimposed on this sort of background noise of modern. But in nature, everything comes out of silence. The bird comes out of silence. And that sort of thing. The coyotes come out of silence. And everything. The rain comes out of silence. It's that coming out of silence that makes it stand out. It's the silence that makes it stand out. That's the background to everything is silence. And it's like at night. People at night, they're just sort of astounded by the silence of darkness. And then the stars come out and they're confronted with the universe, which you used to think was pretty small. I mean, back in the old days, it wasn't nearly as difficult. You were back in 5,000 years ago, and the stars, you could almost go out and touch them. There were these gods up in the sky, and they did their thing, and they ran around, and they did all that, the myths and everything were built around what happened at night against that silence of the darkness, which they didn't have lighting. They had no cure for darkness. Darkness happened. And against that darkness, you had these pinpoints of light that danced around and moved about, went down into the underworld, came up again. And that whole magic, and now happened. It was there, and they kind of absorbed it. It was a big part of their culture. Their navigation, knowing where they were, everything, that whole sky canopy. And now, like in New York, you couldn't even see the sky in the daytime. But people don't look at that at night.
The daytime. Past the buildings that are...
Well, and the smoke and everything in the smoke. Yeah, it was down to almost nothing. But yeah, that whole thing now, we look at it and it doesn't go around the universe, doesn't go around us. The universe is there and we sort of circulate around this funny little star, and we're on this stupid rock that just goes around in a circle, chasing its tail. And we aren't the center of the universe, we're in some obscure little piece of lint next to a star. In this universe that is so vast that even our number system can't even really comprehend it, just can't deal with it. And people used to feel that there was an interaction there. Now we look up at the stars, and we realize that those stars are all at different distances. It's the magic, it's a whole different world. That whole concept that changed. You can understand why the Catholic Church excommunicated Copernicus. And it took till 1998 until they finally decided that maybe with the millennium coming up, we should give the guy a break, right? And it was, yeah, okay. Yeah, the sun does not go around the world. Okay, finally, sure, we're over it. We can deal with it now. And this is our great cultural leading organization of the last 2,000 years. It took that long to deal with reality. And anyway, it's such a massive change. The insignificance of people now, even significant people are insignificant. There was a time when you could be emperor of the world, you know. Now you're just some political hack who's getting paid off to pretend to be a great leader. Or you have some ego that's out of control or something like that. But the whole dimensions of man versus his universe, his space and everything has changed so radically. And we expect that people are just supposed to, oh, that's just how it is. Okay, let's get over it. No, it's changed. And what are we going to do about it? Well, we're going to do whatever we have to, because that's the only choice. Only rock we got. I guess we're just going to have to get over it, you know. And grudgingly, not happy about it, but it's what happened. But yeah, sound against silence, stars against the darkness. Yeah, it's. I think once a year, once a year, typically around the August moon, when there's no moon, right around August, July, August, I go out on my motorcycle. I ride up to out of Penticton towards up Highway 3, go up to the top of it. There's a big long thing on a hill up there. There's no lights around there to speak of. And I just get off the bike and I sit up there and say, hello, universe. You know, in the middle of the night. And that was, yeah, okay, you're still there, I'm still here. Yeah, I get it. Just for that thing, you know.
It's pretty special up there.
Well, yeah. I mean, you could do it somewhere else. That was just sort of, it's kind of a cool place to go up. Happens pretty much a lot of the time up there, you know.
Yeah, it's just
still going on after.
Yeah.
Guess what?
It's just our schedule doesn't permit it.
That was normal Indian TV, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that. So, ¿qué pasa? What's...
Change the angle of the dangle.
Yeah. So,
John, we first met when I was 15 years old. I didn't have a driver's license.
Just as well.
I borrowed a friend's car to drive over to your place, I think when you lived on, was it Spruce?
Yep.
And I didn't really know what I meant. I didn't know the full implications of saying, I want to learn how to build guitars. When I said that to you initially, when we were having our first cup of coffee together that many years ago, I didn't really understand the full implications of what that would mean or where that would take me.
Isn't that the story of life? You get into something, you don't realize the impact. You get married, you don't say, oh my gosh, and then this, oh, that, and a family, oh no, posterity, future generations, a whole thing, right? Just goes, uh-oh.
Just saying yes to one simple thing.
Yeah.
Having one simple question.
Yeah, and making a commitment to it, and poof, there it is, a whole bunch of stuff. You knew it was there. I mean, you kind of, but a lot of people, I think, don't want to. There's a thing, it's not that you can't see this. I mean, it's all happening all around you. Everybody's doing it, right?
Right.
But you don't want to really think about it because it's just too daunting. A lot of that's what I'm getting at with the whole universe, everything that we know now. We know so much. And the fact that knowledge of all this has exploded, and not necessarily in the direction where we used to fantasize, that actually reality out there has exploded on us. And people find it daunting. So they try to sort of drop their head in their phone, find their little chat group where they can stay in a very defined little spot and kind of feel comfortable. Because a lot of people, like I think the Indians kind of, in their own way, kind of felt comfortable here.
Yeah.
It was all they knew. They just sort of had made their peace with it, and there it was. And they had their mythology that explained it, kept them comfortable with the reality that they had out there. Because let's face it, I mean, just living as an organism on this little rock somewhere in the universe is a pretty scary thing. You know, it's pretty. We're really insignificant. It's a dangerous, and we're not in control. So you develop some sort of thing. The same thing with marriage. Yeah, perfect example. Most people do, right? That's why we're here. They have kids and everything. It's the most obvious part of the whole thing. But the scope of it is kind of like you block that out just because you can't deal with the fact you're entering on something that's going to be this, I wouldn't say big, but all-consuming.
Oh, it's all-consuming.
Yeah.
You don't realize the level of commitment required upon the inception of the vows, whether it be to cabinetry,
I think I was
carpentry,
there. I think
marriage.
I was there, wasn't I?
In the same capacity. In the same capacity.
Yeah. Here we are, a few years later.
Just a few years later.
Things have changed slightly.
Yeah.
Well, not really. They've just progressed. That's the word. Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
I kind of prefer digression to progression. You know, like digression makes it easier for me that instead of having one thing that you're doing, I like being able to digress into other things. That's why going out and going skiing or doing something stupid, even just whatever,
right,
just to get you out of that whole. That's where recreation is
the digression.
Digression, yeah.
The distraction.
Yeah.
Recreation.
Just taking time off from the onerous burden of reality, I guess. You know, the Indians used to sit around the fire at night and whatever, dance and sing. The African tribes did all that. Mm-hmm. That was part of, after they got out and did all those various things and murdered some animal and whatever, and all the implications of that, then they'd sit around and tell stories and dance around the fire, and there was that community bonding thing. And that was one thing I find is that what scares me. People say, oh, I'm scared about this, and I'm scared about this. You know what I'm really scared about? Is the death of country music. Because country music, and say what, I mean, I'm an elitist, yeah, okay, playing jazz and this and that and all that, but if you went into any sort of truck stop restaurant anywhere in Peoria or Wyoming or wherever, or some town in California, it's country music. Waylon Jennings and Johnny Cash and all that, so the Carter family.
Storytelling.
This was the storytelling. This was the glue that held all that. You were talking about trades and everything. That's what held all those trades together, was that music.
Interesting.
They were sitting and doing that stuff, and they were listening to Willie Nelson or whatever. They're on the outlaw side, or you're on the Nashville side, or you country, or you Western, or do you like both kinds of music?
Yeah. There's only two kinds.
Yeah, there are two. There's Chevys and Fords and country and Western. You got it. Now, I'm not holding anything against anybody. I have friends who drive Fords and listen to country music, but I'm sort of a Western and Chevy guy myself, But this was the cultural glue, and the automobile was part of it. Do you drive a truck? Do you do whatever? You did the trades, you did whatever, you did the milk the cows and did put the fence posts in and laid the transmission lines, fixed the roads. Whatever you did was part of a whole integrated culture. And it ran on country music. And there were bars you went into that celebrated that culture. You go in there and talk about this and that and discuss what you're going to do tomorrow and what you're going to do for recreation on the weekend. Everything was cultural. There was a cultural unity there, and it was around music. Music it just was. You couldn't imagine it not being there. Mm-hmm. But I look at that whole culture now. It's being attacked because it burns fossil fuels, or it uses fertilizers or whatever, irrigates water, sucks aquifers dry, all the various things that are so bad about just normal, good old boys doing what they've been doing forever and feeding the far too numerous masses in those cities. And everything they do, and their trucks are bad because they put out, that, and when they make noise and smoke and pollute and cause global warming, and everything they do is kind of wrong somehow. And they managed somehow country music that you used to play down at the Roadhouse, sitting down there and singing country tunes. It's gone. It's almost gone. I remember last time I went into Troutdale, there's a truck stop in Troutdale, a massive big truck thing operation. You go in there and they've got everything, motels and truck service and washing and fueling and the restaurant with a massive, 24-hour a day smorgasbord of everything, way too much that you can eat, and huge people waddling in and out. And the bar, you go in there and they're doing Texas line dancing. There's a band playing. And that's sort of even kind of petering out now. It's just becoming truckers and money and just doing what you have to do to pay the mortgage. And
get it over with, and your cultural experience will be what we tell you to watch on Netflix instead. How about that?
Something like that.
You can just drive your truck, get into your motel room, plug yourself into this. This is entertainment now. Yeah,
and there's dubious movies on this channel and dubious women out in the parking lot, and see you in the morning for your big American breakfast.
Yeah.
But the music part is kind of dying out. I don't see that. The dancing, used to have barn dancing, square dancing. Hey, square dancing, is that gone? Used to have the big square dance festival down in Penticton. Used to take up half a block and it was a big deal. I think the dancing's gone.
People would get dressed up.
You got it.
People would spend money, go from all over the country to attend these festivals of culture.
Yeah, and there's things we need to do to tell the people what to do, because most of the people don't really, they just need to know what the answer is. They don't need to know about the details of the question. Just tell me what to do.
Right.
Is it solar panels we need? Okay, let's get on it. Let's make solar power grid. Well, okay, yeah, power grids are us. And that's like you say with the trades. We'll trade our sons out there because that's a good job. And you get out there and when union wage, you can go out there and put up power lines. Oh, how about a railway grid to the standards of, say, Poland in 1955? We could have that in America too, you know, where we have passenger lines, They go along these dedicated tracks at high speed, have freight lines, and it could all be unified so we could shift stuff all over to end. And rail transport, which is still, if you look at it from a 1% of the emissions. I think these are American figures, American emissions figures going up into of carbon is the railway industry.
Interesting.
1%. And that's, trucking is way up there, cars, everything else, but all that stuff, the carbon, 1% of those trains. And they're hauling massive amounts. They're hauling container loads of stuff from one side, going from China to Europe, and they're passing
Immeasurable
over.
weights.
Massive weights, all this sort of stuff. And the cost is exceedingly low. And so why don't we have more of it? Why don't we have, hey, we have hydroelectric here. We got extra, I mean, of all places in the world, they should have electrified railway.
No shit.
Well, this is the hydroelectric capital of the fucking planet. And we're running our railways on diesel? What? Well, the mountains are too hard to whatever. Hey,
Tell that to somebody back in the 1800s.
but you can run, going from here to the coast, you can run something up the top of the Coquihalla and down the other side, and you can have 2 sets of rail. Hey, call it 2, oh no, it's too expensive, says the accountant, can't do that. But if you had 2 sets of rails, what you could have is a freight going this way, going up, and the one that's at the top is waiting for it. As it comes down, the electricity it generates with its electric braking system pushes the other one to the top of the hill.
Just like in a mining application, where the truck going down the hill is driving the one up the hill.
Switzerland was putting in electrified cog railways up and down its hills and stuff like that in the 1890s, folks. 1890s. They were, by the 1920s, they were so far ahead of us, it's just ridiculous. This is 100 years later, and we're still kicking the rails off a railway, the obvious railway line, say down the Okanagan, and we're putting houses over it. And eventually, of course, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to expropriate all those rich guys' beach houses and knock them out of there and put the electric railway line down alongside Skaha Lake, where the railway put it in the first place back in 1922 or whatever. Who could have known? I mean, just who could have known that maybe they got it right? Oh, silly me, bad. So it doesn't matter. I mean, knock down a few houses and finally do it right. The fact that you've done it wrong doesn't matter.
No.
If it's wrong, it's worthless. Okay? It's just worthless. It's wrong. So, okay, knock it down, build one right. You're going to eventually get it on with it. The whole of our civilization most of it's wrong. It's unfortunate to say, it's a daunting thing. It's like getting married, you can only bite it a little, chew it a little bit here and a little bit there, but functionally, well, you look at the housing around this stuff. How much of it's really worth saving? Most of it's not worth renovating, so you can get more money when you resell it. And you put $200,000 into renovating, so you can get $150,000 more when you sell it. But you feel better about it because it's clean and tidy, and the lawn is green with freshly planted grass that'll last about 2 or 3 years, and then it's going to be full of, well, anyway, you know what I'm getting at. Put the lipstick on the pig and get her done with. And, even if the lipstick cost more than the extra money that went into the pig. Well, yeah.
We refer to it in our business and in our shop as chicken skin. Something that's very thin, serves a very limited amount of utility. It's crispy for a very short period of time. And
But
then
it's tasty.
It's tasty for a bit, and then it goes soggy in the fridge, and it's over. We have a chicken skin mentality in this country where it only has to look good and taste good for a certain amount of time.
Until it's sold. Yeah. Get it out the door, okay. And then the reality.
Till it's sold.
Yeah. Sure. Well, the whole world has that sort of instant gratification chicken skin approach to it. And for a while, I think we could afford it. We were just squandering.
So much of it.
So much squandering of resources. We could put chicken skin on everything and think we were wonderful till the new wore off. But now, yeah, there's a certain reality that I think people are having a really tough time dealing with it. Just generally, they parked it over in a corner somewhere where they don't have to look at it that often, but it's there. It's just this festering realization that, oh, this is, well, I guess we're going to have to do it, but it's going to take a long time. And a lot of it is, we're so far behind now.
How so?
Well, I was thinking this morning, fairly soon, any day now, there's going to be the state funeral of Jimmy Carter. And I'm wondering if there's going to be a book that come out that actually has, this is while you're having your Reagan fantasies, this is what Jimmy Carter was really about. And he wasn't about politics. He was a president that wasn't about politics. Sure, he ran for the Democrats. I don't think he really much cared for either party, really. He wasn't there for those reasons, and he wasn't there for his ego, and he wasn't there for the money and all. He wasn't there for all the usual reasons that people are there doing that.
Why was he there?
Well, I don't know. Oh yeah, Jimmy Carter, that failed president, and yeah, right, blah blah blah, and something about helicopters in Iran and whatever it is. I'm a peanut farmer. Jimmy Carter wasn't a peanut farmer. He's actually a nuclear engineer. But you don't get elected to be president of the United States by advertising the fact that you're a nuclear engineer. No, but his family had a peanut farm, so he would pretend to be a peanut farmer, which, hey, worked great. And I think his father had been some sort of political something in Georgia at some point. So that came with the territory. But no, I can't remember exactly how it worked out and the detail. They don't advertise the details, but he got into the Navy, and as the Navy put him through school, he went into the Navy. I think got out of the Navy after a few years, or whatever, Second World War. Navy put him through school, so I think he might have been in submarines or something, and took Georgia Tech, took the whole tech school thing, right? The trades business, but the advanced trades where you learn about nuclear engineering, nuclear plants. And a really clever guy, he got into, I don't know, it's probably, all this stuff I'm talking about is probably classified somewhere, speaking of current topics. And so he was involved in nuclear submarines and nuclear aircraft carriers and that. In other words, making a nuclear plant that could be
mobile.
Well, you put it in a ship, yeah, and actually with how you could live on a basically a nuclear plant with a ship around it and with the cooling water and all that sort of stuff.
Your hot water comes from here, cold water comes from here, your electricity comes
basic plumbing,
from the same.
It's plumbing. Yeah. Nuclear plumbing. The radioactivity goes out the back, right? And gotcha. So he was involved in that, and the nuclearization of the American naval war machine, which isn't talked about, and so came out of that, and I don't think at the end of it he was all that really happy about having done it, I mean,
Now, why is that? That's such an amazing advancement, and it is the only fuel that's going to get us out of this fucking mess that we're in right now culturally.
Idiots. The problem is idiots don't see that, yeah, there's a peaceful use for this, yes. There's a certain amount of disposal problem and so on and so forth, but that can be, the problem is the initial thing is cheap, but cleaning up after it is expensive, and we don't want to incorporate the cleaning up after it expenses into the first part, and so you end up with a bit of an exhaust problem, but yeah, now we're at the point where starting today in a way, nuclear may be an inevitable short-term way of getting us out of it. We either basically get rid of 7 billion people, or we have to probably use some certain amount of nuclear energy.
Well, yeah,
which way you want.
What's the alternative?
Pick
Coal?
one. Yeah, pick one, pick the other. Yeah, you got various. But anyway, the thing about Jimmy Carter is that the whole political system in the United States could basically just whitewashed the whole idea that the president was actually a nuclear engineer.
He was useful and very intelligent, knew how to work with his hands.
So he got into building houses after, so on and so forth, working with his hands. He was a tradesman, like with an engineering at the top, the complete tradesman, right?
The complete tradesman.
Yes.
Yes.
The complete tradesman.
The master builder, the master architect.
Yeah, so he's building
master
a
engineer.
habitat for humanity, but he was also building probably nuclear subs. We don't know. You aren't allowed to look at those papers. Nuclear aircraft carriers, all that sort of stuff.
So the question is how did somebody so useful
end up being president?
End up being president.
Damned if I know. It just sort of happened. There was a vacuum after Nixon. You had Gerald Football Ford there. And the Democrats could run pretty much anything they wanted, and they ran. He went in, and I think what Carter did is he went in. They're all the usual jackasses, all sitting there, fighting over who's going to be the next president after the Republican Party. I think it's not their turn, perhaps. Pardon me. After Richard Milhous Nixon, there was sort of it was time for a change. So Carter went in there to all these other buffoons in there with big political records and doing all the usual song and dance and beating up on each other. And Jimmy Carter went in there with a big smile and a nice guy. And people said, I kind of like that guy. He kind of makes sense. He's different. He's not a politician. At that point, politicians were kind of
Right.
They were.
Right.
So he came in and he wasn't a politician. And he was smart and articulate and everything and a nice guy. And, he's a Baptist. Well, sort of had a family apart from his funny brother, who's a kind of a idiot, but that's okay. Yeah, there's always an idiot in some family somewhere, right? He's kind of a down-to-earth guy. He's a farmer, a peanut farmer. What a change from all these politicians. So he went in there, poof. And towards the end of his presidency, he said, this whole fossil fuel thing is going to kill us, and we have to get into. And nuclear is, on the short term. In the long run, we have to go solar, wind, sustainable, that stuff, right? Which is pretty much, in the long run, that's the best technology for the planet. And as a main source, right? Edison said the same thing back in the 20s.
But that was predicated on
what would Edison know? I mean,
right, of course. But that was predicated on
another tradesman.
a planet that had a lot less people on it during that supposition. So when you start to scale these technologies up and take a look at what we're finding with the electric car thing and battery production and all of that. Remember, I think his name is Mark Mills. He's a Canadian geologist.
Yeah, Mark Mills. Yeah.
You sent that to me.
Did I? Oh,
yeah,
I was
you did.
wondering
And he
why.
was just talking about, this is how much stuff we move around the planet right now. Shows a graph. Biomass, coal, gas, articles that we've manufactured, cars. This is great big huge graph. This is how much we would need to move around the planet if we hit a 70% target on our electric vehicle manufacturing production. And it was just some astronomical.
Where are you going to get 7 times as much copper? Where are you planning? First off, where are you planning to get it from?
How are you going to move it?
But just how are you going to get it out of the ground and all that sort of stuff?
Thank you.
And then you're going to have to do all this blah 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 blah. But yeah, and I don't know. I never got into Mark Mills. Because personally, I'm not really that excited about the guy. I don't think he's particularly exciting. He's not. He's just the messenger.
It was very clear that he was presenting graphs.
It's not about him.
No,
it's not
a charismatic. It wasn't a charismatic presentation. The information, however, like just from even from the scale of business that we do here, we have a single telehandler. We need to move this many packs of material around our yard a day. That requires one operator. It requires this much maintenance on the machine every month.
Yeah, this guy's just a mining engineer who's saying, Houston, we've got a problem.
Exactly.
And,
right?
and people, I think the people on the left want to, where's evidence he's a right-winger, so we can hate him for being a right-winger. The right-wingers, this guy must be a lefty. And they probably go in there and find he's actually, he's just an engineer. He just makes things happen. Mm-hmm. And what you're asking him to make happen is going to be maybe a little more daunting than you're getting biting off a little more than if you take a look under the hood, you might find it's a little more complicated than when you started.
John, you said to me years ago that in order to transition to a more, how do we even want to say this, a more realistic, habitable, I don't want to use the word green, but just in order to transition, we need to use the petroleum that we have in order to invest in these technologies that will sustain us eventually. And when I start to take a look at presentations like Mark Mills, do we have enough petroleum to transfer us over to that next technology that will sustain us? Are we using it appropriately?
There's all this sort of the peak oil thing, which is real, peak demand. They're talking about now we're going to peak demand. All this stuff, the yada, yada, yada about the petroleum industry and everything. Massive amounts of reams of stuff written, but almost none of it deals with the, is it ROEI, energy returned over energy invested.
Yes.
So we start out with when I was a kid, and the oil was, they found there's little swamps beside the road up around Leduc, just north of, I'm trying to remember the Black River that goes through there, whatever, small river.
In Alberta?
In Alberta, yeah. I used to go by as a kid, and you could see the gas bubbling up through the swamps there, and just north of Leduc. And of course, in the early days, somebody said, it smells sort of oily, tarry, smells like gas in here. Why don't you punch a hole in the ground? Guess
the
what?
rest is history.
Yeah, they sort of worked out from there and figured out how to find it in other places, but it was right there. So he just sort of punched a hole down about 300. Ooh, whip she comes, okay, just like in the Beverly Hillbillies. And now we're in business, break out the banjos. And and my father, was all in the business and around it and all that kind of stuff. So I sort of got to watch it all happen. And because it all started when I was a child. And the energy recovered over investment at that point was down to a quarter of a. It was a negligible percentage. What as a piece of pipe, you bang it into the ground and oil comes out. Okay.
You don't have the infrastructure to get rid of it fast enough out of the ground.
He's burned the gas off because we don't have. My father's job was pipelines, plumbing the whole thing up. He was basically doing the legal plumbing for a bunch of energy plumbing, which is utilities law was what he did. And so that was so negligible that nobody thought about it. And then by the time it's a plateaued thing, and you get into drilling a deep hole, now it might be 4 or 5%, but that's just negligible cost of doing business, a little tip, Gets up to around, when I met you, we were looking at 10, 12, 14%. And a lot of that stuff was at the dreg's end. This is the same, they're using the same technology here, folks, but the energy return over energy invested it was costing a lot of money and costing a lot of work and process and whatever, and drilling and fiddling around. And also pipeline building out to some small hole that's only going to put out for 3 or 4 years. Is it really worth it? And all that stuff started to get in the way. But the thing is, that type of technology isn't always linear. Everybody wants to think everything's linear. Most things, unfortunately, far too many things for humanity's likes are exponential. The world has a tendency towards, humanity would like it to be linear, but
linear and reliable.
Yeah.
We know we can expect at this current rate
Yeah.
to be about here in 10
It's
years.
like a forest fire starts out and it's kind of linear, and then at some point it
Then
goes,
it's exponential. Yeah.
and you go, whoa, who could have known? Oh my gosh, that's way bigger than it. And all of a sudden, way bigger, and all of a sudden, just how could that possibly be? So it's like world population is, gee, how could we get that? How did this? It's like the doubling on the chessboard, the squares on the chessboard. Remember that one? Do you know that one?
No.
Okay. Well, it's a myth, but there was somewhere in Genghis Khan era, whatever, back in, I think it was way before that, in the Persian Empire, some guy had come in and done some great favor for the emperor of Persia or something, and at that point they had the chessboard. You know, the chessboard had come from China. And the guy said, well, what would you want? I don't really want anything much at all. Just basically, well, there's a chessboard over there. Just put 1 grain of wheat on the first square, and 2 in the second square, and 4 in the second square, right? And then fill up the chessboard, just doubling it each time, and put it in a bag, and I'll be gone.
Right. Right.
Right. Of course, it didn't take long before they realized, we're
going to starve this winter.
Well, those if you lined up all those grains or whatever, they'd go to the moon and on beyond. It was just, as you get to the last squares, it's just. So I don't know what they paid him, but the point was, I don't know what his point was. His point was, yeah, I did you a favor because I'm smart. Pay attention next time, and you probably won't need me. Mm-hmm. And be careful what you get involved in. Don't get involved in a land war in Asia, as they say. It might go exponential on you.
Right.
That wouldn't be happening now, of course.
No.
No, but if it were,
of course,
it could go potentially exponential. But we'll talk about that another day, maybe next week. Right. But no, what was the whole business of oil? The next range, like the tar sands. What's the ERO? Yeah,
energy
okay.
input versus output. Yeah.
Welcome to Alberta.
Yeah.
There it is. We're there now, and we're up to the point where,
even though it is the third largest reserve of oil known in inventory, Canada has the third largest. Even though we're sitting on that,
right?
The cost benefit analysis of it is still, it doesn't make sense right now.
Well, but the energy required to get all that out of there,
yeah,
is, and we're mining. You always start with, yeah.
Right.
Why is it in Fort McMoney there? Well, why not here or there? That whole reserve, yeah, it goes all the way up to God knows where, up to Hay River, and it's a massive thing. And it's not like we suddenly discovered it in 1978. The engineers around were petroleum engineers and geologists I grew up with were talking about that when I was a kid. They knew when all this stuff was going to happen. They said, well, around 2000, we're going to have to probably start getting into because we're pumping it dry. And I said, well, what? We're going to pump it dry in 30, 40 years? That's the nature of oil wells. Yeah. What? But then what are we going to do? Well, there's the tar sands up there. So if we're going to have that, you're going to have to probably get into the tar sands around 2000. So probably have to start in the late. Guess what they did in the late 70s? This is talking in the 50s, right? Late 70s, poof, the tar sands goes in, pilot plants and figuring out how to get the EROEI up to something that's, because it's got to be less than 1. Because there's more than 1, you're just treading water, you're not getting anywhere, you're just chasing your tail. So it's got to be somewhere. Engineer it down to 30, 40%, something like that.
So 3 to 1, barrel in, 3 barrels out.
No, you burn a barrel, you get 2 barrels, because it says 30, 40%, but that means 30% of it. So the net is only 2.
Right.
You burn the other one. So you burn 1 getting 2. Is that 50% or 2? How do you like to do your statistics? But it still becomes significant. So we moved from 14% to now we're at 30%, and we can maintain that for a long time. Okay. instead of putting nuclear plants all over the frickin' place and plant, why not put one there, shut down a lot of this other crap, run the nuclear plant to boil the oil out of the tar. Wouldn't have to be a big one. In fact, Yellowknife, the uranium is just up the road,
It's just
next
there.
door. Hey, whoa, who could have known?
Knock on your neighbor's
Funny
door.
about that. Yeah. And you can bury what waste you can't get rid of. Actually, if you have a good reprocessor, you can keep reprocessing that stuff. The problem with reprocessing it is a nuclear gets, you're basically taking a nuclear reaction that's exponential. You say, oh, don't let it go exponential, stop it here. But cut cooling water and keep the rods apart and everything. Just let this thing melt that, because if it goes exponential, no. So you keep it down there, and then when the rods and everything get too hot and the cheap stuff is burned out of there and you only end up with the plutonium and things that go bang, you put it away somewhere. So what we're not talking about is as MOX, mixed oxides. Gosh, is this classified? Am I on TV? Can I talk about this? MOX reactors, where you're taking the plutonium and mixing it back in again with other lower grade uranium, mixed oxide reactors, to try to reprocess that and burn it off.
Steal what you can from it.
Because that'll slow it down. If you mix it in really well and kind of dilute it in the rods, and you can basically make the Big Bang, you can spread it out over. And that's the problem at Fukushima, is one of the reactors was a MOX reactor. It was a mixed oxide reactor, I think number 4 or something like that. That, I mean, put it right beside the ocean in an area known for tsunamis. What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, I mean,
on the most earthquake-prone nation in the planet. Oh, okay. Nothing to see here, folks. It's under control. Sure, we'll get back to you. So yeah, we could put a MOX reactor up there, even if it did melt down. It's a hell of a lot better place than frickin' Fukushima. And now, and we can also put it back in those massively 5,000 feet deep mines there. They put it back in the mine shaft down
back
there
in the ground.
where no clown is going to try to make a bomb out of it.
well, and
hopefully.
that's what they're doing in Europe.
Yeah,
That's
sure.
what they're doing in
Yeah,
Europe. They're
yeah.
putting it back in the ground.
Well, yeah, that's where it came
where
from.
it belongs.
You think that's radioactive? The core of the planet. Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Right.
We're living on top of a 25,000 mile diameter or circumference globe with a nuclear reactor in the center. That's why it's still warm down there. That's why it gets warmer when you go in. Hello. Yeah. So, yeah, that's kind of where we are. These are the actual, and of course, who would know this? Maybe a guy like Jimmy Carter might have known things like, nah, he wouldn't know. It's just a peanut farmer. Right. So yeah, there's all this stuff. I think that the preponderance of bullshit right now. This is a time when humanity has to sit it down and have a really honest conversation with itself. You know?
About what?
Everything.
Yeah.
It needs to actually sit down. You know, you're going to have a serious talk here.
Now's the time.
And there's nobody to have a serious talk with other than ourselves. But we have to have that serious conversation with that other part of ourselves somewhere inside that we kind of park away in the corner for, you know, only break glass in case of emergencies. Guess what? Time to break the glass. Bring your reality part of yourself out here and have a long, honest conversation with your fantasy. I was hoping for
Another outcome.
yeah, but now that we're here, and I have 2.4 children, and you know, and needs of the family and everything, I have to actually get responsible, have a serious talk with myself, stop spending time telling lies down at the bar on every night.
That's right.
And actually grow up and ensure that my family and future generations will actually have a future. Because it's no different, right? Not really. But people still want to, they don't want to have that conversation. We're still not really ready for that conversation.
That I think is just a huge part of it.
And people want it to be perfect and easy, and I don't have to actually
That's
do it
right.
and get my hands dirty.
That's right. Yeah, they want to live in an illusion.
Yeah.
I can remember when the power went
Can
out
we
here.
get the Mexicans to do it for us?
Yeah, exactly. How many of them do we need to import? Well, and that's a real thing. I mean, when we bought trees for our landscaping program, I mean, you're not going to get some 18-year-old kid who's perfectly qualified to do that job from Canada. That's not going to happen. You have to import them from across the continent to do that job, which is ridiculous to think about. You can't find anybody to do that job.
There's two or three guys that come out of the tree farm, the
Yes,
meat plant thing.
right next to you, yeah.
Next to us, we walk down. They go down at the end of the day, and they go down to Nestor's and the liquor store, and they buy a few Pacificos and this and that and the other, and some enough to make the enchiladas. And I see them wandering through there, and one day in some island, and I can't remember what it was. Something like. They said something about, sorry, or something. So, de nada. I responded to them in Spanish. And there was this, of course, immediately, they just sort of, and then there's a sudden, just a minute.
Where am I?
Where?
Who's that person?
he responded in Mexicano, this is, what, here? Because a guy like that, like you're wandering through Poland into somebody, you bang into somebody, excuse me, no worries.
Yeah.
And just a minute, this is Poland.
Yeah.
But English is different. Spanish, nobody learns Spanish. I mean, these people come up here, why would people here learn Spanish? That's sort of a lower class language.
So that they can learn how to build flamenco guitars, obviously.
Yep.
Good reason.
Yeah, well, I think Mexicans, I go down to Mexico and here's this guy speaks Spanish, he makes guitars, the whole thing. Why wouldn't you, what's, your own culture? And, I don't know. Why
would I want to separate myself from my own culture, my own chicken skin culture? Why would I want to do that?
And come down here and hang out with a bunch of Mexicans singing cuckoo, what is it, paloma, 2 a.m, on a moonlit night with the stars out there, El Rancho Grande, all this stuff. Know all these tunes and this culture. That's the country music of Mexico. Mexico is country music.
Country music.
Oh man! In fact, most American country music is kind of borrowed and reprocessed, either Scottish, Irish stuff or Mexican stuff. And the country stuff is Scots Irish, and the Western is reprocessed Mexicano. It's norteñas and all that sort of stuff. But there's actual real, so that's country music.
On that, my very limited experience of what you're talking about goes back to the story of when Karen and I were in South America and in Argentina. We were staying in Mendoza.
I'd forgotten about that. That's cool.
Yeah, in Mendoza province. In the city Mendoza, which is such a beautiful city, very Italian, huge influence, and we stayed a little over a month there, touring the wine region and doing everything else. They had this beautiful theater set up there, and we went to a couple different performances, but one that we went to, which I was shocked to see, the level of reception, the quality of people, the vehicles that were coming and going from the theater house for this country music thing, where you had what looked like a mariachi band, these 4 guys dressed up in traditional Argentine garb, and they've all got their guitars strapped to them. I could not believe the response that these guys got, this traditional
and
country.
Everything stopped for this.
Yes,
like everything stopped.
John, everything stopped.
It wasn't like, just passing, okay, so all right. No, man, the whole world stops because it's like the African tribe when you have the dance at night around the fire and everything. Yeah. Everything stops.
Yeah.
The whole culture just goes. This is a cultural moment, and the world stops. We don't do that anymore.
There were lights like this, like in the 1920s Gatsby films that you see. It was everything stopped.
Yeah. Yeah, and so that culture, yeah, and it's still strong. And I'm looking at that, and Mexico and that. Mexico lindo y querido. Mexico beautiful and loved. Lejos de ti. If I die far away from you, right? In other words, in a foreign country, bring my body back, and so on and so forth. I want to be buried in Mexico lindo y querido, which is now run by gangsters and degenerates, yeah, running the country. The good people are at the bottom, and the top is where certain things float too.
John, you told me a story one time about a peasant boy that you saw in Spain and some of the technique that he had in his right hand while playing a nylon string guitar, like some of the guitars that we're surrounded by, and how that language, that muscle memory, that expression, that art, he didn't really have a choice. That was a prerequisite to being a member of this society. One must learn how to move one's hand in this way, to this rhythm, to this song, so that we can achieve this dance, so that everything can stop around us and we can have a beautiful moment. I feel as though that we're missing a lot of this in our culture, a lot of this movement.
Well, yeah, I'm a trained, whatever you say, trained. Nobody trained me. I just watched, observed this, that, and the other, and just did it. Just made it happen. Like you're an expert at all kinds of things. Nobody ever trained you.
No.
You just.
I was too busy doing the things to get formal training. I was too busy buying the tools and doing them.
And by the time you got it all working and had the product you wanted, you'd learned all the skills. And once in a while you'd come up with some sort of, gee, I wonder, and ask somebody, but 95% of it you just did. You weren't waiting for some. And this is where the tech schools and that. Yeah, you go in there and learn all this stuff about the techniques, but you don't know what to produce with it. You got to wait for somebody else, some product manager or whatever advertising guy, to tell you what kind of tinsel, what kind of chicken skin to put on this with a stapler, right?
Yes.
And
yes. Yeah. What's selling? What's hot this season? That's what you need to design.
Yeah. No, I just think intrinsic cultures. I wonder. I haven't been to Spain for a long time. I want to go over there. I'm going to go over there. I have a lot of family commitments that don't allow me to do that at the moment. So that's just too bad. And Spain right now is in a bit of things aren't happy over there. And I'm afraid that I would be rather disappointed at how far it's, what I would go over there for isn't there anymore. Mm. And every time I go back, it just gets worse. And there's less and less of what made it really worthwhile.
Culturally.
Yeah, just stuff. I was thinking this morning about the smells, and I don't say this to my significant other because she's a real germaphobe, but I think she kind of understands. We actually, both of us, had COVID before people even knew about COVID. Mm-hmm. And she has an eye problem, was down at, once a year I had to go down and do all the stuff in Vancouver General Hospital, whatever, they, blah, blah, to measure all the macular blah, blahs. Anyway, and the doctor is Chinese, I think, and whatever, but there's a lot of Chinese presence there. Yes. And she came back on a plane, a little Dash 8, with the guy behind her was, I think, Chinese, whatever, and was just wheezing and gasping and in pretty bad shape behind her on the plane. Of course, at that time...
You didn't think anything of it?
Yeah, maybe he's got the flu.
No.
So she came down with it, and she seemed to recover sort of okay, but it tore the absolute shit out of her throat. Mm-hmm. Like the worst, but it wasn't a flu, whatever, what is this? But it just tore that, It took her throat, not immediately so badly, but then I got it, and I was, I don't know whether I've ever really had the flu. People talk about it. I don't think I've ever had it. But after this, oh, yeah, this is what the flu is like. It got to the point one night I was in bed, and I woke up at 2 in the morning, and because my right lung was gurgling. Mm-hmm. And I never had a gurgling lung before.
You'd never have pneumonia before?
No.
Really?
And I'm saying, ooh, this is serious. If the other lung got like this, I could die. And I'm sort of thinking, well, and you kind of, there's times when you're sick that you know that either, at this point, your body's just in full panic mode. You either get better or you don't. Mm-hmm. And if you're getting better, well then, okay, let nature take its course. And if it doesn't, if this doesn't turn, I'm checking myself in, and they're going to do whatever they have to do. Yeah. And of course, nobody knew what at that time. It was an unknown thing. And one of the problems with that is the knock-on. Oh, you get sick, you get really sick, but you recover, everything's fine. But there's long COVID, and long COVID has various things. As what was it? Dr. Bardwaj, you ever listen to him, the guy in CBC? Anyways, ER guy out of Calgary, and I said, he'll tell you the truth. He's not tied to anybody's. That's why he's on there. He can tell the truth without getting fired. And but so this really devolves. It starts out as a respiratory thing, but it devolves into being a cardiovascular disease. It gets into the bloodstream, into blood vessels, and it attacks blood vessels, and it moves around through the bloodstream. Mm. Colds don't do that. They just get stopped at a certain point. But it goes, your body gets rid of it there, but it goes into the bloodstream. Same thing happens to shingles, you know. It starts out as as chickenpox, mm-hmm. and ends up living in your nerves. Well, how could that be? That doesn't make any sense. Hey, this is not the only virus that has a second life, second kick of the cat, and goes and does something. Not for my second act. And,
many years later.
Sometimes a few months, sometimes whatever. Yeah. But there's a cardiovascular component to this, and it's not the only one. But I could get into that. But that's.
You were talking about smell.
Yeah, but. Anyway, it got into me, into my hands, and into my toes. COVID toes. They talk about COVID toes, right? Well, it got into my. You can see what. Yeah, not a pretty sight. That's finally, I think, winning. They say it often takes about 2 years for your body to finally clean out. If it's going to win, It wins on wherever it went to, and the damage generally tends to reverse itself within the limits, and you may end up with certain problems. But anyway, one of the things it does goes in, because the receptors are in, because COVID enters through your smeller. That's how it comes in. It can also somewhere in your throat. It can come in with some part of your tasters, but it's the smell and taste thing. Some people have lost completely. It went into both nostrils, took the whole. Yeah,
it did for me. It was months before I got it back.
You've been there.
Months.
Yeah, you've been there. So so it. I'm noticing now that I can put in spice. I'm eating East Indian food, and I can taste, but it lacks that real stereo smell, right? I'm getting mono. I've got mono, but I haven't got stereo.
You know it's there.
Yeah, but it's just not as exciting as it used to be.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking of Spain. I was just thinking, smelling. The first time I was in Spain, got out of the taxi down Main Street, Madrid, walking down the road, and the smells of all those restaurants and bars, everything coming out of there, the jamons hanging up there, and all the food and vegetables, and it was just this smell. All the smells were just. Like here, everything's in a supermarket, it's all packaged in plastic and so on.
Oh,
but there, the food, packed. There the food is all the market. You go into the markets and it's just this symphony of smells of everything, literally soup to nuts, all the garlic and whatever. And I'm going down the street, And there's this guy, he's obviously delivering lobsters into this restaurant bar. And there's just a couple that have got away, I guess. And they're scuttling along the pavement. I'm confronted with lobsters in my suitcases. I'm trying to negotiate. These guys got claws. What am I going to do? And this guy comes running on, grabbing these lobsters and whatever, and shuffling them into the restaurant because they'd fallen out or something on the way in. And I'm saying, this wouldn't happen in Canada.
No.
You wouldn't have
the health inspector,
lobsters on the sidewalk. Doesn't happen here.
The health inspector would have shut that down.
Yeah, everything was raw. Everything was right there. Mm-hmm. And by the time I was living there in the 70s, and maybe best part of 10 years later, yeah, the smells were still there, but they was somewhat tempered. It wasn't as strong. And now I look over there, they've got supermarkets and everything's wrapped in plastic, and I'm sure it's all the smells and noises and all that raw, direct thing is all being replaced by some sort of corporate food.
The mechanism of commerce instead of culture driving commerce, we just have commerce now.
And they're part of the EU, and the Germans come in and tell them how to do it, and an orange is this size and it's going to cost this
That's
much.
right.
And all that.
And you pick it when it's green. And
yeah.
The
whole basic corporate European EU nightmare has descended on Spain. And I was there when there was first starting to happen and talking to the guys running the bars and that. So, like, we're sitting in Valencia, and here we are. Actually, it doesn't matter. I was just actually north of Barcelona, but same area. And I go to grab, and there's these oranges there. And I'm having whatever and drinking wine and whatever, and I just, orange is nice orange. I grab this orange and I'm starting to, work on this orange and talking to the guy, and he's being nice, stacking with you, whatever, and so on and so forth. And the guy says, it's going to be 50 cents for the orange. I said, what? 50 cents for an orange? And he's saying, well, when were you last here? So I was living here in the 70s. Oh, he says, back then, and there were 3 cents a pound or something like that. Mm-hmm. In the bars, they just had a bunch there in case you wanted an orange. Mm-hmm. It's like the finger food. But now they're 50 cents. What? 50 cents for one orange? He says, that's what they get for them in Berlin. And if that's what they get for them in Berlin, it's the same price here. But it's insane. They're just, they're in people's, they grow everywhere. Mm. Says, but in the bar, they're 50 cents. I just couldn't believe it. He says, this guy was, he says, welcome to our reality. So we get to have these low wages and everything go with all the farming. But when we want to buy the produce, it's German prices.
Right.
And it's just, welcome to our nightmare. Anyway, this is smell. Yeah, a sense of smell. COVID, this stuff happens. My toes are coming back too.
Good.
Yeah, I lost the feeling in my toes there for a while. They were just sort of permanently numb. It's coming back. And they turned purple and weird, and I had chilblains in the summertime, Nothing, just chilblains in the summertime. What could possibly be wrong, right?
Yeah.
So, you wanted to...
Well, let's just... I'm assuming that the majority of people who are potentially going to be watching this have never even heard of a flamenco guitar or what it is. I know that I had never heard or seen anything about one until I'd met you. And I have guests that come over that I play guitar for. And I tell them, I said, I just want you to know how special this instrument is that you're about to listen to. This is a sound that you think exists somewhere, because where you live, everything exists, and you can consume whatever you want whenever you feel like it. But I just want you to know that this particular sound you've never heard before. It's special. and it represents something about us as a species that you've not been exposed to yet. There's emotion in it.
Yeah, I don't know, I have to warm up, and I'm not really. My fingers don't work very well anymore, and I don't actually play flamenco very much.
This guitar looks like it's made out of cypress, German spruce top. Where's the top from?
This one, this is from south side of the Alps, northern Italy. Stuff like that. Yeah, you're talking about the kids in the street. Like that's just real basic.
That's breakfast.
That's breakfast.
That's
Yeah,
breakfast for them.
yeah. And they play ball after school. They get out in the street and they had some ball game where you bounce it off the wall and there's things that you do with whatever pelota. And the girls would watch the guys playing this ball game, and they'd be sort of dancing and so on. And so there's that whole hand percussion and so on, and they'd be singing. They'd be doing that. The guy would be sitting, and one of the guys would be sitting there playing his guitar in a doorway, on the steps, watching the ball game, eyes riveted to the ball game, and he's coming. Doing that, riveted on the tactics of the ball game. The girls are watching the guys, because that's what girls do, and they're singing and clapping and all this sort of stuff, and it's all about the ball game. And this is just the background music. And then some guy would get tired. He'd come in and all wheezing and gasping. The guy would hand him the guitar. He'd run over and start playing ball. And the other guy would pick up where he left off, and the game goes on. I got to know these kids because they beat the strings off the guitar. Professional guitarists and classical guitarists lived across the street. We'd bring down, tired but functional
strings.
Yeah. Oh, you need a D string and just a minute. Momentito. Espera. Come back. There you are. Oh, wow. They're like new. Como nueva.
New? Okay. Well, turn it around.
They're
the other
like
way.
new.
Turn it around. Put the worn end down here and the fresh end up there, and you got another week out of that.
Tell me about this. So this is 2018, number 98 that you built. Where has this been hiding? I don't think I've seen this one.
Probably. I don't know.
That's beautiful, John. It's a beautiful piece.
It's a nice guitar. I had other guitars to play, and it was kind of new, so I just parked in the corner. I figured to get around to it.
New old stock?
Yeah, new old stock. I can't remember quite why. It was a really nice top. It was so normal. This is like the kind of wood that you got a normal, like it's not super fine grained, not super narrow. It's just wood, right? It doesn't make a statement. It's just wood. This is just wood. Perfectly quarter sawn, really nice Indian rosewood, nice and light.
Turn it around. Turn it around. I want people to see it.
Oh, this way, yeah. Yeah, so just a piece of wood, and nice piece of ebony, nice piece of wood. Really light, that's actually Bois de Rose. It's actually a really light rosewood, type of rosewood that grows in Madagascar, used to grow in Madagascar. And I found one day. So I decided to put that on there, why not? Looks nice. And it looks a lot like a lot of the old flamenco guitars, the real ones had walnut.
Cool.
They just put walnut up there because...
It looks like walnut, doesn't it?
It does look
looks like a fine-grained walnut.
Yeah, it's kind of like the nicest piece of walnut you ever saw. It's actually a form of rosewood.
So just to contrast, John, here's a guitar that I bought from you when I was a kid. You put it in that case for now while we're playing here. So this is 1998. So this is 2018.
20 years.
This is 20 years.
20 años.
20 years.
Sí, sí.
So you built that 20 years before this one. You built that in 1998. I was in grade 10 when you built that guitar, and I bought it when I was 20 years old. Yeah. And I've had it ever since. I've written all of my best music on that guitar. That is a masterclass in fine art, that piece of equipment. Not only, see, this is the thing that I love about guitars. Guitars themselves are art that make art.
The strings are a little...
Oh, the strings are shot on that. The strings are completely shot.
The thing about a good flamenco guitar like that immediately gets your attention. It's like I was talking about the stars against the sky. You can't help but look at them. They're there all the time when you're in the city. You're walking down the street and you're paying any attention to them. Oh, sky. Whoa, look up. Remember the movie Look Up?
Look,
right?
don't look up.
Don't look up. Yeah, right. Yeah. You went, oh my God! All this time, who could have known? Nobody told me. You know.
But don't look up. So out of that silence, and that's where I was in a bar in Barcelona, of all places. It's kind of cool because Barcelona has the Barcelona culture, and this cab driver I was talking to, and what do you do? A guitar. Oh, okay, you want to live, stay this pension, and there's, it's all, everything. It was the little sort of gypsy flamenco quarter of it's about 2 blocks in Barcelona, where I didn't know that, but all these people are like flamenco people. They're all not Catalans. They're in this bar, and a guy walks in, noisy bar, everything's happening, blah 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 blah. I was sitting there with a guy from Denmark, so we were speaking English. I was introducing him to food, and I noticed the sandwich he brought that was supposed to be, about 250 pesetas was suddenly 700 pesetas. And I'm trying to think, I was in this bar earlier today, and I had one of these. And just a minute, the price has tripled. What happened here? And this wine isn't whatever, and it's all in the wine. Okay, doesn't matter.
Visitor's tax.
Yeah, so I'm sitting there, and anyway, guy walks in, and immediately, poof, the bar stops. Silence. And this guy, and there's a slow tap coming in, and
awesome.
Builds up, and there's this point where doing the palmas, it often starts out really slow, and then it builds up into a fast dance thing, much like a lot of East Indian music does.
Yes.
In fact, it's East Indian music, and which is another topic for another day, but got into the fast part, and the bartender's leaning over the bar and watching, and he's doing the dancing, we're doing the clapping, whatever, and we're sitting doing this palmas back and forth, and it finally comes to an end, kabam, and the bartender looks over and goes, "You." He's been doing palmas with the next guy over, riveted on the scene. And then he realized, it's that foreigner I just overcharged triple. Mm-hmm. Oh, disculpe-me. I did not know. So suddenly, poof, we couldn't pay for anything.
The bill was absorbed by the moment.
Absorbed. Sorry about that, yeah. Because, you were speaking English. I didn't realize that you were, it's okay.
That's a real thing. We experienced that in Argentina as well. There is a different bill for you. There is a different bill for you. In hotels, in restaurants, in ice cream shops.
Huh.
Yes.
This guy was really embarrassed. He said, "You didn't say anything." So, well, no, I was, it's okay. And so it was really funny. It was just one of those funny experiences. Hey, by the way, this is not a shabby guitar. But just that. Strings are terrible.
Oh, they're awful. Sorry.
But just you get that. That's it's that flamenco hits you. It's percussive. It's dancing. People don't go. Whoa, like it's not like
You're not waltzing.
No, it's not like Frank Sinatra. Whoa, strangers in the night. What were the chances? It's strangers in the night. What were the chances? Strangers. Imagine that. Strangers in the night. Oh, the night with the stars. And everything. It is so dramatic. Now it just grabs you by the cojones. I just go squeeze.
That's flamenco.
That's flamenco. It's direct. It's now. But people say it's harsh. It's not harsh. It's explosive. But it's explosive, and then the note explodes, and then it wails. And it's and it goes. It's like the Arabic thing where they go out and bang, and the note has that long. So yeah. But and the guitar is like that. It explodes and then sings. But getting a guitar that's good will grab your attention. You pick up a guitar, and I'm going to this guitar store and you pick up your Yamaha and it goes plunkety, 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 sounds like...
Boom chang.
It goes boom chang or whatever, but it doesn't come out and grab you, right? Whereas a flamenco guitar goes immediately, and now you have the responsibility. You got to make that note. Oh, you made that note. You got to make the next one. And it's got to work too. You can't just suddenly drop the ball, right? You're out there playing. And you can mumble away and do mediocre crap all night long on mediocre guitars, which is what a lot of people do. But this is, well, you're going to dance or not, Once you start dancing, you got to keep dancing. You can't just, oh, sorry. It's a culture where you have to put out. You have to make it happen, right? And you have to pay attention. Like you're saying, in Argentina, everybody has to pay attention, and there it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is what we're focusing on. This is our culture. This is what is the most important. These are the smells of our culture. These are the sounds of our culture. And all of this comes out of nothing.
You can't do that with this culture.
No.
Canadian culture, it's everybody's wandering off in their own little...
They're in their own little Netflix
whatever.
world.
You can't grab those people and say, sit down and this is what we're going to do. There's no actual organization. And people, if you elect a government that would come out and tell the people, this is what we're going to have to do. And actually get your tent, get everybody, shut everything down. Okay, shut down all this other stuff, internet, everything. Here we are, and now I'm going to tell you this is what we need to do. This is what Jimmy Carter did in '79. He had the first of his, what do they call that, sweater chat or something, where he got down in front of his wood stove in the fireside chat type of thing that hadn't been done since FDR, the first fireside chats back when. This guy Hitler we're going to have to, sorry about this.
You might want to pay attention to this.
Yeah, I think we have to, as a nation, pay attention to a threat here. And so on. But Carter had his thing, and he was going to say, we're entering into a situation that is not going to work out well for us. If we start now, we have a chance. We can do it in a reasonably it's going to be a lot of work, but it's not going to be a catastrophe. If we wait another 30, 40 years, we're in deep, deep trouble. And this is the 40 years, this is the 1979, whatever, and it's about 40 years, by about 40 years later, when he said, yeah, you're going to be in trouble. It's just the same as those guys saying these oil wells, well, yeah, but they're going to run out by, in about 40 years, and we're going to be, so we better start working on those tar sands, otherwise we're going to be short of firewood in Alberta. And exporting, what? No, it's gone. We're going to be back to digging coal out of the Rockies, and that's pretty ugly stuff.
John, why are we even talking about exporting? That's what I don't understand. If we consume 2.3 million barrels of oil a day and we make 2.2,
and the world stops, right? You have to listen. Why are we exporting?
I don't even think we need to say anything else. Why are we exporting? We have the consumers in our backyard.
For what?
For our natural resources, which, by the way, I heard somebody say something really interesting. There is nothing natural about, go ahead, about a 2x4. There's nothing natural about petroleum. The only thing that we should be focusing on is the amount of labor that went into producing that final consumable good, and there was nothing natural about that. That was all human ingenuity. So when we're talking about natural resources, without human ingenuity, there's no such thing. Without talent, without trades, without engineers, without Jimmy Carter, there's no nuclear submarine.
Well, that gets into the other huge hoax that's been, you hear about, oh, it's a hoax, the fake news and all this. One of the biggest hoaxes I hear is the way we've used language, like 1984, where Well, that would never happen here. What do you mean? It already happened, folks. Right. Yeah, it's over. It was over by 1948. He just took the last two numbers and pretended that it was happening in the future. He was Orwell, or was a journalist communicating whatever. He was saying this is what they're communicating. They're telling you. In the process is the message of receiving the information. Package is what it's about.
Right. Of course. How it's being delivered is the message.
Yes. But and built into the language, how you talk about Newspeak. Newspeak was already around. We talk about money. The government spending all that money, as if it's spent. Money isn't spent. Money just changes hands. It's not spent. I point out that you basically got dated figures now. It's a little more than that, but I think it's about the U.S. economy is about $30 trillion a year. U.S. money supply is $3 trillion. Well, how can you spend $30 trillion?
10 times.
It's 10 times, and that's because every one of those dollars changes hands. There's a transaction about once a month. Mostly rents and bills and all that, utilities and all that other stuff going around, and businesses doing whatever they do.
That dollar changed hands 10 times.
And it's all set up so that that velocity of money is that if it changed hands 5 times a year, you'd have to have twice as much of it. And if it was 30 times a year, you'd have half it. So it's not, money isn't really a thing, and it's never spent, doesn't go away. Money only really functions when there's a transaction. When there's a transaction because somebody did something for somebody else.
They added
made
value.
Something happen.
Yes.
That's the idea, is that somebody made something happen.
That there was value added.
That there was value added. And a lot of what goes on today, a lot of the value isn't really produced. Money's just being transferred around, but what's happening for it? It's the idea that we can't afford to do it. It's like you can't afford to dig a hole in your backyard. If you got a shovel and some time, you got a hole in the backyard. Mm-hmm. Well, what did it cost? How do we have an entry that in the? No, because it's just an accounting system for human activity, is all it is. Mm-hmm. And so money, you can't really. It's not spent; it's gone. People say, "Oh, I spent my money." Yeah, well, when you spend it, that's somebody else's income. Mm-hmm. Never thought about it.
It just didn't just disappear after you were
I get
done
my
with
money.
it.
Is people spend money at my place, now I go spend money at their place. Yeah. Now, if we really need something done, the government can go decide to put in a decent electrical grid or something.
Piece of infrastructure.
Yeah, and that's how we built how could we possibly afford the Trans-Canada Highway? Because government spent the money, and the money went out and changed hands, went around, and got a highway because we had people available. But you have to have, as you're saying, you have to have the tradesmen, you have to have the people, and they have to be willing to actually work and make it happen.
And you've added that we also need music to take us through all of that. We need country music. But what are they doing in the Chain Gang? They're whistling, they're singing a song.
Yep.
They're down in a pit singing a song to get them through it.
Yeah.
So along with all of, and this was what one of our other guests, Mike, was talking about. I mean, though it feels like we're toiling down in a pit, this is the highest form of art that we can think of, is our architecture and the various mechanical elements that go into it and the finishing of it. It's not just the finished product. The whole thing is art. The whole thing. The whole thing.
We're always going to have community. We can't survive without it. We have to have community, and we have to have that sense of some sort of center thing that binds us together. And we've always had that. That's part of human existence. Like I say, the black guys in the chain sang work songs, and the cowboy music, all that sort of stuff. It's always been there. The barn dances and. On
that, if I can interject, I'm not sure if you've ever seen one of these things on YouTube where it's like, it's a time chart of the empires of history, right? And they'll start at like, the Romans or whatever, and it goes through and it shows the Romans in power, and then it shows their stock going down, and the British Empire coming, or whoever coming in, and the Ottomans, and then they're just changing. I saw one for music the other day, from 1960, who was at the top of the charts, to today. And how long they were at the chart, what they were doing, and the police come in, and then whatever, what I'm saying, Led Zeppelin, and then the Eagles, and I was looking at all of this music, all this art form, all this great fine art, this high art that we've been worshiping and idolizing for our generation, and then I'm seeing, they get into the 2000s, and it's Drake.
What?
Right.
Drake. Oh, Drake.
Drake. Canadian. He's this Canadian rapper, right? And so, because it's not my music, okay, I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go check out, if this guy's at the top of the charts and has been for the last 15 years and he's ultra rich.
There's got to be a there.
Is there something? Is there anything?
You must have missed something.
Did I miss something? So then I go onto his YouTube channel and go over his most watched, most played videos. And unfortunately for me and in my taste of things, there was absolutely zero emotional content there. Zero. There's none of this. There's none of that. There's no out of the darkness.
There was no meat under the chicken skin.
It was just chicken skin. It's just fluff. It's just flap. It's popcorn. And he really is like, did you make a commentary on anything universal? When you hear somebody like Don Henley say, the music that we wrote was the music that you drove across the country to.
I was thinking that the other day with what's his name? Gosh, I'm terrible with names. Gordon Lightfoot. Yes. Who went on. I'm thinking about the great Canadian music of that period. From the U.S. point of view, because I was living in the U.S. late 60s and so on, and the two, you mentioned Canadian musicians down there, and you had Anne Murray and Snowbird, yeah. And then you had Gordon Lightfoot, and I can't remember the name of the album. There was. It's the one with Mountains and Marianne, and Pussy Will's Cottontails, whatever, and Roses or something like that, and Soft Night. Anyway, his first big sort of more popular as opposed to folky album. And I remember driving across the U.S. one time, listening to that over and over again because we only had 3 tapes in the car. So Lightfoot. Normally, I wouldn't have spent that much time listening to Gordon Lightfoot, but that's what they got, and it was okay. But the great Canadian song of all time was the Canadian Railroad Trilogy, and that just the one line, the opening line: "There was a time in this fair land when the railroad did not run." When the majestic mountains set alone against the sun, right? They're stark. They're there. There's nothing. It's like the scars against the sky, right? And too silent to be real, too silent against that silence. You start building cities and the Calgary frickin' Tower in front of them, and railways, and cut them 6 ways a Sunday and drag the coal out. They're still there, but they don't have the same majesty that they had for the Indians going across the prairies, and then the mountains were there. It was just, because there wasn't anything they weren't paying attention. There was nothing else to pay attention to.
Of course.
It was there, it was stark and real. We've got so much stuff that's taking our attention. Everybody's going around fingering on little screens and looking for, it's like they might as well, the Rocky Mountains, there they are on the screen. Oh yeah, it looks nice. It's not quite the same experience. It's not the same experience, right? It doesn't, you don't have the smells. And the Indians, the first time they're coming across the plains, and and they see those mountains, and then all the kids know what it smells like there. Same way a salmon finds its way back. He knows what it smells like in the river that it came up. No, that one, heading to the right. You know what it smells like, you know what it looks like, you know what it feels like, you know what the air feels like, and all that. Whereas in your little pad there,
Every day's the same.
Yeah, exactly. It's safe.
It is really amazing, especially like being where we are, what we've built out and living out here when you're talking about something out of nothing. There is a real vacuum out here in the wilderness where we live. And even though we only live like 10 minutes from town, which is a small town, there's just a completely different energy at nighttime. There's nothing up here. Nothing.
You know what I'm getting at. You can go out your porch and guess what? You got that. I go up to the top of the mountain there to see. You got it right off the front porch every day. Well, on clear nights, right?
There's nothing.
Yeah.
There's no dirt bikes. There's no trucks driving by. There's no lights. There's no lights. There's nothing.
The sound of silence. A lot of people never heard it. They'd never heard the sound of silence.
We had such a violent runoff this year that when we were lying in bed with the window open, we because of the topography of the area, we are on the point of 3 valleys converging. And the predominant wind is out of the west, and it comes through this deep ravine that has the second largest body of the second largest tributary of water in the Okanagan Basin. It was right below us, Trout Creek.
I think it's actually the largest. Apart from the inflow at the north.
Yeah.
Fall the Mission Creek and all the other ones, this is actually the largest.
That's amazing. Yeah, so
yes, sorry. Yeah.
It's an amazing resource that we just happen to be living on, which is incredible. And so when we open up our windows to the west, it is like a natural swamp cooler every single night of wind just blowing through our house. Gives us natural air conditioning, which is a really nice benefit. And then because we have such a thick thermal envelope that we're living in, our input costs to cool it and heat it in the winter and summer are very low. But when we had our windows open in the spring runoff, you could hear
the lake refilling.
You could hear the lake refilling, John.
Yes.
You could hear that. You could hear every snowflake melting from up where we are, and you know how far away we are from the creek. Just the amount of energy.
It's a trickle-down economy here. You know?
Shit goes downhill. But you're not getting that in town. Like you knew where I used to live. I was sardine canned in between 2 1970s houses. We made the mess of it there, but just no room.
We made the mess of it, you say?
We made a mess of it, and it just didn't seem like there was enough room to kind of root out. And when you're in the wilderness like this, when you are pressed up against that majesty, as you say, that infinity, that you realize how small you are, but you also realize in all of that, if you take yourself seriously enough, how big things can be, how big your vision can become.
Well, this is the kind of spot out here that the Indians would camp.
They did.
Yeah.
They did, right on the corner of these 3 valleys converging. Yes.
Yeah. I see that out in the woods. You get the deer will come up on top of some ridge and they'll look around and so on. That's their spot, right? They'll have a spot where they go and see what's around. I don't see any cats. Sniff the air, this, that, check the wind. There's those power spots that the animals have. And this is like a power spot. The Indians had their power spots and did exactly the same thing.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
John, the amount of mule deer that we have transiting through this property in the season is unbelievable. And not only that, but I find, it's going to sound ridiculous, but I find little rocks in odd places walking this property. We've got 35 acres out here, and you'll get into a spot like what you just described, like an intentionally hard to get into spot that has a special resonance about it. We have a couple of those on the property, and you'll just find a very peculiar shaped rock, which seems to be very intentionally placed. That's quartz.
This didn't fall here. Yeah.
And you're looking around, you're like, this is like perfectly white, perfectly this weird shape, perfectly placed right here in this. You're like, come on. This didn't fall from the fucking sky.
Yeah. Well, that's what they did too. They just sort of, you know, put something here for the gods, right? Here's a really nice rock I found. Here's a whatever, right?
As we do.
Yeah.
As we do.
Yeah. And well, yeah, every civilization pretty much did that. Why would this one be any different? I think we're finally paying attention to the Indians, you know, and realizing that maybe they know something. I was actually amused this last week where they had a plane crash in Colombia. Did you hear about the Colombian plane crash? Anyway, for some reason, some medical whatever plane, a small plane with, and these people were, you could tell by they were they were right out of the jungle. Like these people had very little contact with modern civilization, and they were being dragged off to Bogota for something or other, and then coming back and the plane crashed in the jungle, and pretty much I guess the kids were in the back and the adults were up front. And so the adults, everybody died. And there were, I think, 4 kids, 13, 9, 5, and 2 or something like the usual. And so they survived it. And their mother was still not going to make it, right? But told them, just go, leave, get out of here. Don't wait for me, just go. I'm going to die. So apparently pretty tragic. So they wandered off in the bush and off into the jungle. And of course, they immediately had this manhunt out for these people. They looked for them for 40 days. They finally had tracking dogs and whatever in there. They found all kinds of things in the jungle they weren't looking for. And they finally found these kids. And they figured, well, they'd written them off. They must be dead by now.
They must have starved to death.
Oh, they've done this, all that, and the other. They finally found these kids. And the kids, they looked a little primitive. I mean, their shoes or something they didn't have, so they'd wrap their feet with something, parts of their clothing, so they'd have something to walk with. And, you know, they improvised a little here and there. And they had a few insect bites and scuffs and scrapes, right? But they had to drag them back and put them in the hospital, make sure they were okay. The thing is, how could these kids have survived? Like, and then I guess the head kid just said, "Oh, we just did what our grandmother told us. Did all the things like our because the grandparents in all primitive societies teach the children.
Of course, while the middle people make all the money and do all the heavy lifting.
And this is just going to happen and that's why grandparents are here. They're not going to work much past 50, but they live to 80 so they can teach the grandkids how to do the stuff that they used to do. That's right. Right? That's called, industrial training or something?
Intergenerational integration.
Yeah, but I mean, that's how the culture passed on. That's where the book of the knowledge. And so old farts like me had some sort of usefulness at that time. So anyway, it was interesting. They said, we just did what our grandparents taught us about, because they're still teaching, even in the more sort of, this modern thing is kind of happening, but this is how we did it in the old way. And if things break down, things get bad enough, you may need to know how to do this or sew that, or make a bone out of a needle out of a bone, and how to
whack a seal over the head.
And whatever you have to do, wherever you are. So, but this whole idea that this is even a big story, this miracle. Right. You know, if it had taken you, instead of 40 days, it had taken you 80 days, they'd probably be in better condition. By that time, they'd have set up camp somewhere, stopped being nomadic, and started to get their own culture going again. Well, they just have to, bootstrap up again. Yeah. What do you think they did there for the last 15,000 years? Yeah,
do you think that they were there accidentally?
Well, how do they manage to survive for 15,000 years without us?
Yeah, how could they didn't have Netflix 15,000 years ago.
My God, they didn't have anything. How could this be? Well, look at that deer. He doesn't have anything either. He's doing okay. Seems to do fine. In fact, some places they do even too well. Too many of them.
It is a miracle, though, that we are all here in the face of all of the potential adversity that you discussed previously about how the planet is out to kill us. These elements are out to freeze and burn us. dehydrate us and shrivel us into a grape. That's what this is. That's what we're doing here. We're trying to get away from seasonal elements constantly. Enjoy them while we can, not too much of them. Can't stay outside too long. You get sunburnt or freeze to death, especially in Canada.
Well,
You want to have a comfortable experience. The level of training, I guess this is one of the things that I'm so frustrated with, is that the amount of infrastructure that goes into supporting our comfortable experience here, I think, is completely overlooked. People have absolutely no. I get clients all the time sending me photos of houses that are in California. Can we build something like this? Can I have a space that looks like this? No, you can't. You live in Canada, sorry.
But I want this adobe and real adobe. I want the walls 4 feet thick with this kind of mud.
Yeah.
Okay, right. Probably not such a great idea. But yeah, those Indians, they just, well, you'd look at the adobes. I was actually took down in New Mexico with Denise, took her into this place. The walls are, it was a convent-y type of thing at one point. The walls are adobe, but they're actually 4 feet thick.
Well, they had to be.
Tapered. And the roof is massive, and so when you get in there, and this is New Mexico in the summer, it gets a little warm down there, you know, and it'd be, you know, pretty stinking hot. When this place is now a restaurant. You go down in through the door, and go to the restaurant, and it's, you know, sort of 68 degrees Fahrenheit in there, and but it's dead silent. In fact, at the back there's this shrine. You go into the back of the place, and there's the whole original shrine thing left over from it being a convent where you went in to pray. And the restaurant's noisy, but you go back in through the rooms and around the corner and into this place, and it's dead silent in there. They've engineered it so that it's dead silent. And you're realizing, outside there's traffic, there's trucks going around, roundabout, beep, beep, honk, honk, jets going over top, and it's dead silent. So your thoughts are now confronted with, it's the where you go to have silence, where you can hear your thoughts because there's no other racket. You can just be there and hear existence. You can sort of hear the blood rushing through your veins.
All you hear is the blood in your ears.
Yeah, and wow. And so that's that experience is sort of, dead silence. Go back into the restaurant, way around the other side of the building's noisy and so on and so forth. How come it's noisy in there? Well, the internal walls are all. Yeah, right. This is, and well, how could they afford to do that? It's called mud.
Yeah.
You just make it out of mud, and there's lots of mud out there, you know, with the water and dirt. And you just, you know, there you are. So this is how the primitive people. They didn't have to have air conditioning, electricity, and that. In the wintertime, whatever temperature it was, by the time it cooled down, it was spring. And you had a little fire in there. You built some fires and cooked and whatever, and you.
The proceeds of the hot summer kept you warm through the winter.
Yeah, and your body warmth, and it was warm enough. You might want to wear a sweater in the winter.
Had a couple cats and a couple chickens running around to heat it up.
Yeah. And that's how it was. And that's how people were there for 15,000 years doing exactly that. And we come along with our new and improved thing. and
Now you only build the wall this thick and it's full of foam. And we heat it and cool it with a heat pump and all this electricity and all this infrastructure.
And all this stuff to keep ourselves busy maintaining. So we bring the Mexicans up to do the agriculture for us so we can be busy doing heating, ventilating, and air conditioning and all that sort of stuff. I guess so.
Yeah.
But it was a bit of, it's interesting when you find situations like that where there's this juxtaposition.
Yes.
You know, of this versus that. And you get this, but most people don't want that. Oh, they want to just, they're all they see is this, so that's all they need to know. Don't confuse me with the truth. My mind's made up. And so the problem is that kind of cultural possibility. The nomadic existence of the Indians, you know, as populations increased, they had to give up being nomadic and had to get into agriculture instead of going out there. And then with the agriculture comes the cities, and then the ownership of land and stable populations, and this city-state,
fertilizer,
having war with that city-state, and so half the people have to be making armaments to keep these guys out of their corn patch, and the whole modern nightmare begins, starting about 3500 BC. And we still haven't really figured out agriculture, because we really haven't figured out part of the agriculture is one of the crops is us. And we're growing too many of us for the amount of corn we're growing, right? We're at that point now, for the amount of water to have the amount of corn to have the amount of number of us. So, or we have to kick all the animals off, and we're pretty much doing that. So, yeah, it's just like bad farming.
Bad farming. I've heard that. I've heard a bunch of people talk about how we've perverted farming from what it really was.
Yeah.
Where you would follow a herd of animals that would follow the, as you've just said, the natural occurring crops of whatever. Mm-hmm. Wherever you were. Mm-hmm. And they fertilized as they went.
I don't know if I ever mentioned this, but the original, the idea that the glaciers receded and the plains of Saskatchewan and all had been under ice, got all refertilized because the buffalo came up and pooped all over it, and so on and so forth. And they started doing the calculation, well, the buffalo was eating the grass here and pooping it there, right? And moving that edge forward, yes, like painting, the wet edge forward up with pooping and so on and so forth, that the numbers didn't work out. So then they started looking, well, how the heck could this have happened? How did it manage to go from being glaciated back to being prairie again? And finally they discovered that what actually made it happen was the birds. Because birds flew. Like
right.
Ducks and that would come up, and they could hang out in the ponds where it's wet, and they'd eat all this stuff, and then they crap on the land. And they thought, well, that couldn't possibly be. It's just little birds.
Yes. How about a billion of them?
How about multiply that by a billion, right? And then you realize that, oh, yeah, right.
Yeah. Go hunt snow geese in
and
Saskatchewan
then hang around the
November.
ponds and poop around the ponds, and the ponds got bigger, and all those puddled ponds in Alberta that are all over the Saskatchewan, they just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And now the ducks come in, and they eat the grain, the farmers don't like, and go over and poop in the ponds and so on. I grew up duck hunting over there, and the smell of rotting duckweed and bird shit around those ponds was certainly, bird shit. People don't get it. And what did we use for fertilizer before? Guano, yeah, bird shit.
Bird shit.
It was feet deep, and they mined it. This whole island is just full of bird shit. Manhattan is built mostly on oyster shells and that. It's the birds that grab the seafood and everything, go up and smash the things, right? Drop them on the pond, eat the stuff out, and then they end up with this sandbar just got bigger and bigger.
Massive
and bigger
piles
and bigger.
of silica.
Yeah, and all sank on top of itself, and you go down there and you dig anywhere in Manhattan, you're running into shells. How did the shells get? I tell you one thing for sure, those oysters didn't walk up there to die.
I'll tell you one thing for free.
Yeah, and never talked about it. Yeah, and now we're sort of killing off all the birds and wondering, what could possibly go wrong? The burden of proof.
The last remaining dinosaurs.
Yes.
Besides alligators.
Good idea that a few of them survived. Yes, interesting stuff. The world is so fascinating. Just so I'm 75 now. I'm still just coming across, I can just fascinate myself, just going out there and being aware and looking at stuff and saying, oh, wow, this is how the world works. Who could have known? Meanwhile, in your basement, while you're watching the Canucks game, the world is still out there. It's still running.
Right.
It's still amazing. And we can still learn from it.
On that, the Canucks game in the basement thing, the last hockey game that I watched was a Canucks game. And I think it was when they went deep in the playoffs years ago, whenever that was, 2010, 2011, or whenever that was. And I can remember looking outside and seeing my sister-in-law and my wife in their bikinis out on the lawn washing my sister-in-law's convertible. And I'm inside watching a hockey game. And it's beautiful outside, and there's beautiful women outside, and there's a beautiful car outside, and I'm sitting on it's May. What the fuck am I doing inside? And then I took that thought a step further after I had sworn off ever watching a hockey game again and just said that is just utterly a complete waste of time. I started looking at the amount of leisure hours that are spent consuming sports in our community. So let's just take it, for instance, a hockey.
Not doing them, just consuming them.
Just taking them in, just consuming them. So you have 18,700 people in Rogers Arena or wherever it is, whatever it's called, right? They had to drive there, which in Vancouver traffic, let's just call it an hour. They probably went out for dinner ahead of time, hour and a half, and spent a bunch of money, okay? There's at least 3 hours in the stadium, and if you don't go to overtime, right? And then you got to get back home. So, I mean, it's a full work day, right? It's a full work day for 18,700 people. And you think of what we could have accomplished collectively with that many man hours. That's one game in one arena in one city, and our entire continent.
If we'd spent that same amount of time and energy on building a new, properly interconnected power grid, which we don't even have here, by the way. I could get into that's another story, but right.
It's astronomical the amount of time that we spend distracting ourselves.
But you start getting after taking on hockey, though, you're skating on thin ice.
And that's why you're here, John, the puns.
Really?
That's really why you're here.
That wasn't a pun, really. That was just an analogy, whatever.
Yeah, whatever it was.
Yeah. I'm trying to rise above puns. I know that it's the low-hanging fruit.
The lowest form of humanity?
Yeah. But yeah, this whole idea that we can't afford it, or it would take too much time, and all this stuff.
That's going to cost too much.
We're too busy doing totally useless, fruitless things that have no lasting benefit. I mean, who won the Stanley Cup in 1992?
Who cares? I think it was Montreal Canadiens. Patrick Waugh in net. Who cares? Who cares? That is completely useless trivia that has absolutely nothing to do with where we're going culturally.
But there's a trophy somewhere that we're supposed to be really, at the time it seemed so important.
Yeah.
But the lasting value is pretty much, and that's why you have to keep going back for more chicken skin.
Yeah.
Now I quit watching hockey. I used to enjoy it to a certain extent, but I totally walked away when the carbon fiber hockey stick came up. You're calling it a stick, and it's a carbon fiber hockey stick designed to launch this hard rubber thing that started out probably as a well-frozen horse apple, right? I mean, that's the way you took a stick, and one little bend in it kind of helps, and the horse puckies are out there on the pond, and you set up the net was just a couple of whatevers, and a couple of whatevers over there, and you went out and went at it. That was hockey. That made sense. And nobody got concussions, and they weren't fighting, and
right.
There were no boards. Boards? What? No, back then you had people all around, and if it got too far to bounce, somebody kick it back in, and
That's right.
You just kept on playing. You didn't need Rogers. Anyway, yeah, enough of.
Can we talk about? I want to talk about this instrument here. This is, I'm very fortunate to have commissioned you to build this instrument for me back in 2019. This is number 100. This is the 100th guitar that you built. The material in this, I can remember when we went down into your very modest, humble basement, and I got to pick out the wood, which I thought was really special.
Yeah.
And it's made out of ultra high grade, perfectly quarter sawn spruce on the top. Same detail with the ebony fingerboard and the cypress body, just to see the back and sides, perfectly quarter sawn. Very honored to own and play this instrument, and just wondering if there's anything you want to add to what I've said about this. It's pretty much, when I'm looking at these two instruments together, they're essentially the next slice off This is 98. My friend Paul Henbury has 99. Great Wayne Gretzky's number, if we're talking about hockey. I own number 100. Is this just more of the same, John? Is this just more of this lost art that is dying?
Whoa.
Is it just more of the same? Yeah, look at the quality of the wood on that.
Goodness. Yeah, the sides are just astounding. Actually, I was looking at an old guitar, flamenco guitar I have from 1998, and I was looking at the sides are just like this, exactly the same. And back, this is a little bit higher grade.
Yeah.
And that thing still plays just fine. Yeah, it's different from, it's seems to work. What do you think?
Well, I sort of be.
It's a little bit clean. You know?
It might be too clean for me, this guitar.
Aren't good enough to really make this thing work. The action's a little bit too high too. I think it'd be
Yeah. Yeah, it's, yeah, it needs, the action could be a little touch lower, I think.
Yeah, well, we're not talking about that right now. Let me see that thing.
But it depends on when you want to play on it. I mean, I was...
Interesting, number 98, number 100? No, that's 101.
Yeah.
The pearwood,
Yeah.
the great pearwood. John, thank you very much. One of the 1,000 conversations you and I have had over the years. More to come, I'm sure, in this capacity. I mean,
We're going to turn it back to NPR and our usual program?
yeah, NPR, yeah, exactly. I guess what I really wanted to kind of just expose is that there's no piece of wood on this guitar besides the neck and fingerboard that are over 2.7 millimeters thick, give or take, back.
Yeah, or in old speak, about 3/32 of an inch, I guess.
So, I mean, when somebody sees something like this, they're like, oh, guitar is a guitar, you grab a guitar, you go over there, you play the guitar. That's what it is. This is such a delicate, this is like holding an egg, a robin's egg in your hand. It seems, when I hand this over to a pedestrian, they pick it up, they're like, holy shit.
They feel it was just a minute, come back here. Yeah.
Exactly.
Whoa!
It's going to just fly out of their hands because it's so light, it's so delicate, yet we can be so emotional behind one of these things. And I would say, like, you just take a look at the amount of wear and tear that I've put on this guitar in the last 20 years. This is where I've worked out all of the battles, right here. How could something so delicate facilitate such, like, emotional content? It's a really very interesting juxtaposition of structure, and you are a true engineer. Your art is collapsing in front of us, and I really hope that you are able to, as you've done with me, pass these values on to as many people as possible, like this.
Yeah, the problem, I think the problem is our culture is throwing away stuff of great value in with the mix of all the other stuff, right? There's stuff that's valuable, actually. To people just, it's out of style, so they just toss it away. Along with the other stuff that basically was designed to be thrown away in the first place.
Of course, it gets lumped together.
Yeah, we don't differentiate between. As one of my pet peeves is we go down and they have our town councils and our governments and everything, and we do not make any distinction whatsoever between reversible actions and irreversible actions. We use the same process. Oh, we'll just the council can vote against chopping down that tree in the town square.
Every 10 years, a subject comes up, and they finally, and then some council comes along and says, oh, we're going to chop down, then they chop down the tree in the town square. And of course, 5 or 10 years later, somebody comes along and says, we've decided to put that tree back up again. It doesn't work that way. That tree was 300 years old. It's gone, folks. It's done. It's over. There's only one way here. And some things reversible, but we use the same.
Throw it out and we'll get another one later when we need it.
We don't make a distinction between reversible and irreversible action. Every moment you have is irreversible. The moments you just had, you can't go back and redo them again. And people don't want to think about that because, oh my God, what if I did something wrong and I'd have to live with it for the rest of my life? Well, guess you've already done that. Everybody has. Everything has, right?
Yeah.
It's called scars and learning experiences. And yeah, you did it wrong. And you try to repeat the ones that are worth repeating, and the others, well, that's sometimes shit happens, right? Mm-hmm. So, but it just bothers me that yeah, reversible and non-reversible actions. I mean, I'm sure you've done reversible things, non-reversible things.
Most things in my life are reversible through proper fine-tuning of thought and amendment. There are some things that I've done that are completely irreversible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there you are. It's a reminder to make that distinction, right?
Yeah.
You'd think people would learn in their own lives to make that distinction between the reversible and the irreversible.
Truly.
And then make that in our governments and all the other things that we do collectively. But collectively, we're kind of, like you could actually have a society. I think we're approaching where we can individually pretty smart, but collectively really stupid.
Exactly.
Is that possible?
I think it is possible. I think one of the things that we were discussing previously is what got us up to 1945. What got us past the Nazis? What was it? It was a collective spirit. It was a good versus bad. It was a good versus evil. And when you take a look at the fabric of our societies, previously they were typically predicated on like Christian principles, where you've got a community that believes a certain set of things, that if you do this, you'll get this result. If you do this, you get this result. So we're going to do this instead. And now we just have this free-thinking, liberal, do whatever the fuck you want whenever you feel like it thing. If you want to be a boy this week, you can be a girl next week. It doesn't work like that, unfortunately. And I guess I just wonder, I think we're exposing ourselves to the risks of not having a common set of beliefs that we all follow, just a common set of practice. Whatever it's called, I don't care what it's called, I don't care what you call it. But not chopping down that 300-year-old tree. Let's just go back to that. Let's just agree that that's all something we're not going to do.
Yeah, and see, I think it's easy to get well, again, is making the distinction between the things that we can fix later and the things we have to fix now, or there won't be a later to fix the other things in, right? Because you can't fix it all at once. And humanity is going to evolve and all that and change over time. But there's well, in anybody's existence, there's things that you can do because you want to do them. But then there's the basic, well, then there's what you have to do to survive today, what we have to do and what we have to do. Unfortunately, right now we have to do it collectively. It's a whole bunch of stuff we have to do. Mm-hmm. And we have to decide on it and make sure and whatever, and deploy the resources to make that happen. And we don't have a choice. We can't put it off anymore. That's why I sound like Jimmy Carter. We put Jimmy Carter off for 40 years, which he told us not to do. It's easy to put this off for 40 years until later. But 40 years from now, you're going to be in a world, it's going to be way, way, way more difficult. And he's right. The guy's honest. Imagine that. Honest and forthright and out there. He's wonderful. The guy deserves statues. I'm not these other clowns and military idiots. No. There should be a statue to Jimmy Carter. As far as I can tell, he always told the truth. Imagine that.
What a concept.
Yeah. He was actually educated. Everything he said and he meant. He was the real deal. He still is. He's still there. He's still surviving at 98 or whatever. And yeah, but he's the kind of guy that just doesn't look like a hero.
The unsuspecting hero.
Yeah, he just, how did this guy be a hero? But he is, I think. You know, he's a hero. He did whatever he could until they kicked him out. And then he went off to do whatever he could. And I think that's what somebody's got to come down and say, okay, folks, we're all in it. It's all one planet. We're all in it together, and we have to do, each one of us has to do what we can. And otherwise, ship's on the rocks, and then everybody's swimming, and it won't be pretty.
We're just floating out there in space.
So everybody's going to have to row, folks, and we're going to have to, that's the direction.
Everyone's going to have to row.
Yeah, okay, suddenly your galley, it wasn't what you saw, it wasn't what you had planned for yourself, but yeah.
Now you're in a chain gang.
Now you're there, you are, and if we work really hard, we might just, you know, get around that point over there without running aground. Choice is yours.
I think that's a good place to leave it, John.
Yep, okay.
Thank you very much for all of the attention you've poured into my life over the years, and this is one of many more conversations, hopefully more to be recorded.
I hope you edit the heck out of it.
I will be, don't worry about that. It'll only be like a 4.5 second clip, this one.
Yeah, bunch of bleep, 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 bleep.
We'll run it through the politically correct filter, and we'll get there from here.
Make the sausage.
Make the sausage. Thank you very much.